Hey, what's going on, Guardians? TBL here, and today we're bringing you something a little bit different. In today's video, I'm going to be talking a bit about a weapon that's very close to my heart. You guys know it, you probably don't love it, the Thorn. I finally got my hands on Year 3 Thorn, and while I'm not going to be reviewing the weapon in today's video, I do have a review for it coming out somewhat soon. I got to get a little bit more of a feel for the weapon. I did want to give sort of a first impression sort of video on how I feel about the gun right now, because certainly a lot has changed with Thorn over the past year or so, and a lot certainly changed with the coming of Rise of Iron. Most importantly of which, I think we all know, the overall toning down of Thorn's dot damage, knocking it down from 7 points of damage a tick down to 2 points of damage, and then in Rise of Iron, a 25% base range reduction on the gun. And really, that's the big point of focus here. We all know with how hand cannons have been working basically since the Taken King came into effect. Hand cannons rely very heavily on the range stat. As a matter of fact, the range stat is the single most important factor on your hand cannon of choice. If your hand cannon has anything less than max or near max range, you're going to notice a lot of inconsistency, a lot of ghost shots, a lot of shots that you may have aimed pretty well but just didn't hit anyway because the game decided you missed. That's usually due to your range stat. And really, until the release of Rise of Iron, Thorn really didn't suffer too much from that for a variety of reasons. One, it gets Send It, which is a fantastic range boosting perk. And two, in terms of range with hand cannons, Thorn was really in a class of its own. Its damage fall-off curve was actually a lot different from other hand cannons, even other hand cannons that were in the same archetype of maximum rate of fire, like the Thorn and the Last Word are. And because of Thorn's naturally high range, plus Send It, plus its further out damage fall-off curve, the gun always felt really consistent, like you could really challenge people into the outer echelons of mid-range, even into the Taken King, when stuff like Bloom and Ghost Bullets were purposefully introduced to try to keep hand cannons sort of on a leash. Thorn still felt really reliable because it had that really good base range. And that, of course, went away with Rise of Iron. Thorn did wind up getting a 25% range reduction, and I'm here to talk a little bit about how I feel with that and how it's worked with the gun. And I gotta say, you can definitely tell that this thing does not hit as far out as it used to. And as a result, it definitely doesn't feel anywhere near as consistent at close to even mid-range as it did back during the Taken King. And now, in the Taken King, Thorn wasn't really broken. I know that's kind of a controversial, heretical thing to say for some people, but after Thorn had its dot nerfed, it really wasn't a broken gun. It was a very good gun because its range allowed it to be super duper consistent. That was the best thing about Thorn before the Rise of Iron. You could point, pull the trigger, and if your aim was good, you'd be guaranteed that that shot would hit. A good example of a gun like that in the Rise of Iron would be the Palindrome. The Vendor Palindrome basically has maxed out range. It's why the gun feels so good, it's why the gun feels so consistent, and it's why a lot of people are running around with it in the Crucible. It's a gun that plays well, it hits hard, and it's got the range to make it a consistent weapon due to Bloom. Or rather, I guess I should say, in spite of Bloom. And that's probably been the biggest change for me since Rise of Iron came out. I definitely feel like I'm experiencing more missed shots that were pretty well placed, pretty well aimed, and pretty well executed. Shots that I feel should have hit, but aren't anymore, just like any other hand cannon that doesn't have maximum range. Thorn as a whole feels a lot less comfortable for me now, at least in mid-range. In close range, of course, the gun still works pretty well. Being a faster rate of fire hand cannon, it can burn people down pretty quickly. The problem is, it can't burn them down quick enough to compete with stuff like shotguns, which are running rampant right now, or even the Last Word and some other primaries. And really, because of that, now in comparison with other guns like a nicely rolled Ias Luna or my Palindrome, Thorn just doesn't feel like it can compete really well with those guns anymore. Like, currently my favorite legendary hand cannon of choice in the Crucible is my Ias Luna. It comes with basically a max range roll. It's got sure shot, so it's got a little bit of extra aim assist in there, and it's just a very nicely rolled Ias Luna. It right now blows the Thorn out of the water. Again, it's not saying the Thorn is a bad gun. No, in the closer brackets of mid-range, and of course in close range where, you know, the gun is consistent, it works pretty darn well, about as well as you remember from the Taken King. But I find that right now, at the very least, in other situations and engagements, regardless of whether I'm running aggressive ballistics or accurized ballistics, it's just not really able to compete with the vendor palindrome, which again is fantastic. If you haven't picked it up, it's basically exactly what you'd want in a hand cannon. All the range you could be looking for, plus rangefinder to push out the damage fall-off curve even further out. The Thorn really kind of just can't compete with that great gun and a nicely rolled Luna. Or rather, I guess I should say, in these first few matches that I've had ever since I completed the bounty and got Year 3 Thorn, it hasn't felt as consistent, it hasn't felt as good, it hasn't felt as reliable as the palindrome and my Luna. And so I find myself using those other two hand cannons way more often. That makes me kind of sad because this gun, again, before Rise of Iron, after it had its dot damage nerfed, Thorn really wasn't broken. It wasn't really broken at all. It was in a very usable spot. It was a very reliable hand cannon because of its range, and it was basically able to compete with the other top runners like the Luna and the Hawksaw. And again, in my opinion, it really didn't need that extra range nerf, especially when we've already got stuff like Bloom to worry about. And so, like I said, with all that in effect, current Year 3 Thorn, while not a terrible weapon, definitely is a far cry away from where it was during the later parts of the Taken King. And my initial impressions can be summarized to, in close range, and well, in PvE, the gun feels pretty good. It feels just like the Thorn of old, well, except without the really great dot damage. That's pretty much a useless perk on the gun now. Its real benefit is just to be able to see people behind walls. But really, at mid-range or anything outside of, like you're seeing right there, it's just not reliable. I mean, that was pretty comfortably into mid-range, and Thorn just outright got outshot by the last word. And ultimately, there are other guns that feel way more comfortable right now, so it's kind of hard to justify using Thorn. But we'll stick it out. I've got to get some more footage with this thing, got to get a little bit more time to get used to it. But again, these were just my first impressions of the weapon. A full review will be coming out later, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. It's not too often that you hear the words, Thorn needs a buff, but I would definitely say this thing probably needs to get at least some of the range back. I think that or either the altogether removal of the bloom system would probably do this weapon a lot of good, as well as a bunch of other weapons. But those are just my initial impressions. I'll let you guys know if anything changes in a future video. Be sure to let me know what you guys think of the Thorn down in the comment section below. Do you have it? Do you think it's as good as it used to be, or does it need a little bit more of a buff? Be sure to let me know. But alright, that's it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, I am TheBlackLink. You Guardians, stay frosty.